So you're looking for a $300 spinning reel. Which one of these should you get? So this price point is definitely not for everybody. There's some phenomenal reels. They're a lot less money. So we already did a couple videos, the $100 and $200 price point videos. Put those right there, so make sure you check those out. Having said that, when you jump up to this price point, you definitely get some upgrades over the other cheaper reels. Now, before I go any further, before you roast me in the comments, I'm not saying that you need to buy a $300 reel. Let's get that out of the way. Are you gonna get a great quality reel? Yes. Do you need to spend $300 to get out there and go fishing? No, you absolutely do not. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the 3 reels that we're gonna get into today. This is the Daiwa Saltist MQ. We've got the Shimano Sustain. We've got the legendary Penn Slammer. This is the most current iteration, the Slammer 4. So let's go through each one of these reels and let's compare them to the next one down on the totem pole in their respective brands. Starting with the Sustain. So the next reel down in Shimano's hierarchy from this would be the Stratic. So it's basically an exact $100 difference. So the Stratic's about $220, $230 depending on the size. This reel is about $300 to $330 depending on the size. So what do you get for that $100? Sustain has 2 more bearings, so you should get some increased smoothness over the Stratic. And then this also is a rigid support drag. So what that means is that the spool has increased support by the main shaft, which is going to keep it on plane better and more accurately while it's spinning when your fish is running. It also has the MGL rotor. So what that does is it's a much lighter rotor when compared to the Stratic, which gives you a much lighter startup rotation. So if you watch that video, the $200 reel video, that was one of my kind of critiques of the Stratic. It just feels a little heavy to start the actual reeling rotation. With the Sustain here, it's incredibly light. Another thing I want to mention about the Sustain too, the Stratic has this as well, but this has the long stroke spool on it. So as you can see, the spool itself is taller and it does have this really nice lip to allow the line to fly off the spool very, very easy and very quickly and very freely when you're casting. So the Saltist MQ has something similar, although it's not as tall as the Sustain here, and the Stratic for that matter. But with the Slammer, they didn't do anything fancy with that. It's just kind of a normal spool, got a normal lip. There's no chamfer on that lip like these other 2 reels. So now let's talk about the Slammer 4. So the reel below this in Penn's hierarchy would be the Clash, but I'm not going to compare it to the Clash because this is a extremely different reel than that. It's more heavy duty. It's not supposed to be some lightweight finesse machine. This is a powerhouse of a reel, which is more similar to the Spinfisher. So I'm kind of going to skip the Clash and compare it directly to the
Spinfisher.
So, I mean, the Slammer is a legendary name. You ask your dad, you ask your grandpa if they fished about the Slammer, and they 100% knew about it. This is a incredibly popular reel and has been since it was released in the saltwater game. But what does the Slammer get you that the Spinfisher does not get you? So starting with the drag here, you get 5 more pounds of drag on the Slammer. So the difference there is you get the sealed Slammer drag versus the HT100 drag that's in the Spinfisher. So in this 2500 size, you get 20 pounds in the Slammer as opposed to 15 in the Spinfisher. The next thing is bearings. So the Slammer gets you 3 more bearings than Spinfisher, which should get you better feel and better smoothness. And that's definitely apparent. If you grab one after another, you will feel some increased smoothness on the Slammer. And then water intrusion rating. So the Slammer is IPX6 rated, which means that it can withstand 15 PSI water jets from all angles, which is extremely impressive. The Spinfisher has IPX5 rating, which is basically just splash proof. So it's still very good, just definitely not as water resistant as the Slammer. And then to that point as well, the Slammer also has a hydrophobic line roller. To be totally honest, I don't know how much that does. Hydrophobic means, you know, that water's afraid of it and it sheds water very easily, and the line roller is a very common failure point in reels, so they call it that, so hopefully there's some value there. So now let's talk about the Saltist MQ. This is the most popular Daiwa reel that we sell. Now just below this in Daiwa's hierarchy is the Ballistic MQLT, but again, that's more of a very lightweight, very finesse type reel. In a similar way the Spinfisher is to the Clash, so they're kind of different. It's not exactly apples to apples comparison. So the one I'm going to compare to is the BG MQ. It's much more similar to this in terms of kind of its design and kind of what it's for. So the Saltist MQ has the air bail, which is an extremely hollow, lightweight bail wire, and it looks heavy, but it's kind of an illusion. I mean, it's very thick, but it is hollowed out, so it is extremely light. Also has the air rotor, which is very, very similar to Shimano's MGL rotor. So it's the same idea, just a much more lightweight rotor. You can see the cutouts in it to allow for a lot lighter weight, which makes that startup very, very light. It also has Daiwa's legendary mag seal, so they have magnetic oil basically that they use to seal certain parts around the reel rather than rubber gaskets. It also has their tough digigear, which is larger gears with bigger teeth. So that's kind of opposite of what Shimano's doing. Shimano's got larger gears in them as well, but they're going to a much smaller gear tooth. So that way their thought process is there's more teeth in contact meshing together at any given time, which allows for smoother rotation. And it's also less force applied to each tooth as they're together. So Daiwa's kind of going the opposite. They've got larger gear teeth, which in my mind maybe means more power, but somehow they're making the reel smooth. In my mind, I don't know how that could be smoother, but this is a heck of a smooth reel. But you're not getting any more bearings in this reel over the BGMQ, and it's $100 more, so take that for what it is. So now let's go through some specs. So we talked about what makes them different in the upgrades to the lower reel on the totem pole for each respective brand, but now let's go through detailed specs of each one of these reels, starting with the Saltist MQ. So I've grabbed 3000 size in the Saltist MQ and the Sustain, but I grabbed a 2500 in the Slammer because it's just a bigger reel that's, you know, basically the same size as the Saltist MQ and the Sustain. So keep that in mind. So the 3000 Saltist MQ has 7 bearings, has a gear ratio of 6.2 to 1, gathers 36.8 inches of line per crank, weighs 9.5 ounces, has a line capacity of 250 yards of 15-pound J-braid, and has a max drag of 22 pounds. So now let's talk about the Sustain. So the 3000 Sustain has a gear ratio of 6 to 1, has a max drag of 20 pounds, weighs 7.4 ounces, has a line capacity of 200 yards of 10-pound Power Pro, retrieves 35 inches of line per crank, and has 9 bearings. And finally, the Slammer 4, again, this is a 2500, has a gear ratio of 6.2 to 1, has a max drag of 20 pounds, weighs 11 ounces, has 9 bearings, and has a line capacity of 240 yards of 10-pound braid. Now let's get them in the hand and see how they feel. First up, back to the Saltist. This reel feels great. I don't know that I'm a giant fan of the huge power handle, but that's totally my opinion. That has nothing to do with quality of the reel. That's just, again, my opinion. It's large, so maybe if you have large hands, you might really like that. But for a 3000 size reel, you know, an OEM part, it just feels big compared to the rest of the reel. But the reeling action's extremely smooth. That startup inertia is very, very light thanks to that rotor. There's, I mean, the tiniest amount of play, which is great. The bail itself opens and closes very, very smoothly. This feels really good overall. Let's hear the drag. It's very quiet. I like a little bit louder drag, but again, totally my opinion, but very quiet. But it feels great. It feels very, very good in the hands. Next, we've got the Sustain. Gosh, this feels really, really good too. Very, very light starting up, again, thanks to the MGL rotor. However, when you're reeling, there's a little bit of feeling in the gear teeth. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, but if we go back to the Saltist MQ, gosh, while it's spinning, it just feels a little bit smoother to me. And maybe that's the bigger power handle, you know, it's kind of helping you go, I'm not sure. But this just feels a little smoother while you're reeling it than the Sustain does. The Sustain does feel significantly lighter. Let's feel the bail here. Bail action feels great. It's got a little more play in it than the Saltist does. It just goes back farther. Just something to think about there. Let's hear the drag. Yeah, a little bit louder. I like the sound of it better. The handle, a little smaller. I'm just more used to this. I do like this better. I'm just more used to it again. Much lighter. Maybe not quite as smooth, but still feels fantastic. Finally, the slammer. This is much, much heavier, and immediately we make that connection there. This is, I mean, it's got much more metal on it, quite frankly. Now, I do like the power handle on this one. It's a little smaller than what's on the Saltist, and it's an EVA foam. So I do like that. Again, it's a lot of handle on a 2500. I'm not sure where you would need that torque, but you've got it just in case you do. Bail feels good. Opens up about that much. Let's hear the drag now. Sounds good. It sounds very, it almost sounds dampened, like hearing seals in there maybe, which would make sense. It's got that sealed legendary slammer drag. But no, it sounds good. It sounds like a Van Staal. Smoothness is fine. It's nothing to write home about, but that's not the idea of this reel. It's not like this reel, when they're designing it, I don't think one of the big goals was smoothness. It was water intrusion and how to eliminate that. So it seems like a battle in reels. The more emphasis put on sealing a reel, usually that results in not as smooth of a reel overall, because they're kind of fighting each other. Anywhere you're going to have movement, you know, between a handle and a body, between a spool and a main shaft, between the rotor and the body of the reel, anywhere there were these moving parts, you know, touching and rubbing up against each other, to put seals in place that have to touch both surfaces like that, it's not good for smoothness. So again, it doesn't feel bad. It just doesn't feel nearly as smooth as the other two reels. So now, which one should you pick? I always gravitate to Penn for the bait guy, the charter guy, the heavier just fishing in general guy, maybe the offshore snapper guy. This would be a phenomenal reel for that. But again, this is a Penn thing here. It's heavy, it's bulky. I mean, you feel like I could run it over with my truck. I feel like I could throw it against the wall and just pick it up and keep going with it. But this might be another great option just based on its IPX6 rating for the kayak angler. If you've got reels down behind you or in front of you, wherever the heck your rod holders on your kayak are, you know, the reel's gonna be that close to the surface of the water. You get in any waves, you splash with your paddle. I mean, no matter what reel it is, it's gonna take some splashes when you're in that environment on a kayak. So this would be a phenomenal reel for that. It might fatigue you a little bit if you're fishing for a really long time, you're casting artificials, you're throwing it all day, you're gonna have some fatigue there, but that's at the expense of knowing that your reel is rated for 15 PSI water jets, which is much stronger than a little bit of splash out of the water from your paddle, whatever. Now this is a little bit harder of a choice. They're both phenomenal reels. They both look great. I think for me, they are very close in feel, but if it was me and my choice, again, there's no right or wrong here. You might totally disagree with me. Let me know in the comments. But I think I'm gonna pick the Sustain. I really like the handle better. I'm not one to buy aftermarket Gamexus handles. I think they're great. They're super cool products. I like an OEM look and OEM feel. And I really like the handle a lot better on the Sustain. And again, I do fish artificials more than anything. I very rarely fish bait, so I really like the lightest I can possibly go with, and I'll take the sacrifice of a little teeny bit less smoothness. Now it's very marginal, but to get the handle that feels more comfortable. But the Saltist MQ is a phenomenal option as well. Like I said, I do think the reel feels a little bit smoother overall. It's just the handle that I can't wrap my mind around. It's not comfortable to me. But if I was fishing with somebody who didn't bring my own stuff and this is what they had, I would fish it and I'd probably really enjoy it. I might get used to the handle, I'm not sure. Let us know what you think in the comments. Are you spending this much money on a reel? Are you spending more than this on a reel? If you are spending 300 bucks, which one of these are you picking? That's it, guys. Make sure you comment down below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our future videos. Let us know what new videos you want to see, and we'll catch you in the next one.